Welcome everyone to a celebratory ThursdAI. Today is April 10th, 2025. Can you believe it? It's 2 years and something after we started recording these on a Thursday when GPT-4 was released. And today is our 100th episode. I'm so excited. Let's go. I am for once, I'm going to use these like reactions thingies from Apple. I'm going to go with some confetti. Let's see if this works. Yeah, let's go. Thank you, everyone, for being here for so long. I'm very, very excited to open this episode. Joining me, Wolfram. We're going to have a few more guests down the show. Wolfram, welcome. How are you, man? Looking good?
Man, I'm so excited. So much interesting stuff to talk about, especially you will mention it, but I have some favorites.
Yeah, we'll definitely discuss some very interesting research that you did. I also see... Let me just introduce myself first for folks who are here, new folks, although I see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. My name is Alex Volkov. I'm an AI evangelist with weights and biases, and I've been doing this for a while. With me, Wolfram, and I see your title also AI evangelist, but also AI evaluator. How do you pronounce this? I love this.
Yeah, AI evaluator. So doing the evaluations, that has been my main thing, and now I joined a company where I can do it even more and even bigger. So that is a big thing for me, and it fits to the Llama 4 stuff I did as well.
What's the company name? Give them a shout out.
It's LLama from Germany, llama.com. And yeah, I just started this month, and I'm really excited here. And AI evaluations, that is our thing, and it's been my thing, so it really aligns. And the evaluation in the sense of giving AI value, that is also very important as an evangelist. So we want to show the good things AI can do, and I'm more excited than ever to be doing that.
100%. And so I work with advisors, you work at LLama, and folks maybe don't know that we've talked about your evaluations on Llama subreddit for a while before you joined. And since then, you've been basically a co-host and a great friend. So really thank you for joining on this journey. I'm really, really happy that you're here, because for weeks like this week, your expertise in evaluation is absolutely crucial for us to give the audience the complete picture. For folks who are just joining, you're joining on ThursdAI. We're a weekly AI podcast, live show, newsletter, community. There's so much happening in ThursdAI for the past 2 years that I've been doing this. And I'm very, very excited to celebrate the 100th episode this week. 100 episodes is a lot of episodes, and I believe we've missed maybe 3 Thursdays for the past 2 years. So with that, self-congratulations. I think it's time to actually talk to folks about what happened this week. We're going to have a full show. I've been chatting with a person that's very dear to me about the show, and I always, the day before the show, I was like, there's so much to talk about. I don't know how we're gonna make it. And she was like, well, you always say this and you always somehow make it. So folks, let's focus on how to actually deliver all this great news. And I will just say, we're gonna have folks joining us in a second, guests that worked on some cool models. As one of the coolest things we get to do on the show is talk with the authors of the cool things we actually talk about. And so that's going to happen here as well. Please stay tuned. We have a couple of guests and then also a couple of guests later down the show as well. So in the beginning and later down the show as well, as we start with the TLDR. Everything that I'm going to talk about is going to get in the newsletter. You can get this in the newsletter, and you can subscribe to it on our Substack, ThursdAI.news. And the reason for the TLDR is that if any part grabs you, you'll know pretty much approximately where it is going to be in the show. So with this, we'll welcome Nistan as well, LDJ, Nistan, Wolfram, and Raven Wolf. Let's do another celebration for 100th episode. Let's go. And we're off. I love the sound effects. And then we're off to talk about our TLDR, folks. All right, this is the TLDR. Here's everything that we're going to talk about on ThursdAI, and we'll start with open source, of course. And the biggest news in open source this week, of course, is Meta drops Llama 4. Llama 4 we've been waiting for it for a while. Scout and Maverick, both models have dropped. Scout is 109 billion parameters. Maverick is at 400 billion parameters. Both of them are MOE models with significantly less active parameters. We're going to cover that very messy release, and we'll do some evaluation sharing from Wolfram and some general vibe collections. As you know us, that's how we get to know which models are great. We'll also have friends from Together AI and Agentica announcing DeepCoder 14b, which is now almost a state-of-the-art, if not state-of-the-art, in multiple reasoning and non-reasoning places. So we'll chat with Michael, and I will find the name of the other author. And the third author, our friend Alpai, said he cannot make it. So this is like a boo because we've been waiting for Alpai for a minute. But other folks who've been training this model will chat with us. I see Michael already almost with us here. So we're going to chat about DeepCoder 14b, which came out of nowhere and is really, really, really good. NVIDIA finally gave us Nemotron. You folks remember we talked about NVIDIA Nemotron. They're distilled and pruned versions of Llama. Distillation is a way to cut down the model size, and pruning is also another way to cut down the model size. And they're done both, and they're probably like the best of the world at this. And they've distilled a Llama 405B into 253 billion parameters, and it performs much better, which is quite incredible. So shout out to the folks at NVIDIA for this effort, and we're going to cover NVIDIA Nemotron Ultra as well. We've been waiting for this. The other two smaller versions came out, and they've been great. Gina, our friends at Gina, released a re-ranker M0, which is state-of-the-art multimodal re-ranker. We just mentioned it briefly because if you are into this RAG type thing for multimodality, that's absolutely a thing for you to know about. And then we also had DeepCogito, which is a new company, and they release models all the way from 3 billion parameters, 70 billion parameters. They're beating DeepSeek trained Quen, I believe. And yeah, we're going to talk about DeepCogito as well. There's also this one that I wanted to mention, and they kind of get buried in the news as well. Kimi released a vision language model and VL thinking model. Both these models are only 3 billion parameters active, also MOE, and they beat Quen, and they beat like a bunch of other models for a very significant portion of activated parameters. Very small, very great releases from Kimi, great lab, and always get lost in the noise. That's in open source, folks. We move to big companies and API updates, which I will say, until an hour ago, Google absolutely controlled this category this week. Google has their Google Next conference, huge conference. Shout out to Weights and Biases team. If you're on Google Next right now, go and give them a high five and talk to them about Weave. But Google has this Google Next, so they had a bunch of announcements queued up, like literally a ton of things. Gemini 2.5 Flash is coming, which is great, and soon going to be available in Vertex. So far, we only had 2.5 Pro, so 2.5 Flash is like a new model is coming. VO2 editing capabilities. You will now be able to edit videos with VO2. One cool thing that they released is a comparator to all these vibe coding places, which is called Firebase Studio, which is basically, they used to have it called Project IDX, and now they rebranded it and they changed some stuff. And so Firebase Studio is absolutely something that you guys should check out, and we're going to talk about this as well. The main cool thing that I liked is that they announced official support for MCP. Let's go. Google joins, as a huge company, Google joins the MCP effort. And Google is announcing official support for MCP coming to their SDKs. We already knew this based on Sundar saying, hey, to MCP or not to MCP, that is the question. CEOs of big companies don't know about the thing unless the company already is involved in it. But Google is announcing official support for MCP, joining Microsoft that announced last week, AWS that announced last week, all of these great companies. Basically, no one left anymore besides maybe Elon with Grok, but who cares? I'm just kidding. Google also announced, in addition to supporting MCP, something new called A2A protocol, which is agent-to-agent communication protocol, which Weights and Biases is a proud launch partner with this. So we'll definitely let you know about A2A protocol because I think it's very, very important and yeah, very interesting. Our friends at Cloudflare, they announced a new agents SDK, NPM iAgents, and that agents SDK is very simple, and they can use like a bunch of stuff. They're also all into the MCP hype train as well. Small thing, Anthropic announced Anthropic Max, a $200 a month tier, basically, and that tier is giving you more quota. There's no new models, which is, I don't know why people will pay for this. And lastly, Grok 3 finally launched their API tier, so now you can access Grok 3 via API, Grok 3 Fast, and then also Grok 3 Mini and Grok 3 Mini Fast. Now, these big company updates were all that I had up until last night. And then this morning, Sam Altman said something, basically hype. So something today from OpenAI, folks. As always, we will be on it. So I think that this is it on big companies' APIs, folks. Comments, Wolfram, LDJ, Niston, anything that I missed from the big companies, very important stuff?
They did say that O3 Pro actually will be coming in the next couple of weeks. I don't know if we'll also see that today or not, but that's something exciting to look forward to.
Yeah, so OpenAI breaking news, that's what we'll write down here, and then we'll get it. Folks, this week's buzz is going to be very full. I'm very, very proud of, and I want to tell you all about this. I've mentioned this briefly as a teaser in the last show. We finally launched Observable Tools. Observable.tools is an initiative to invite people to basically create the future of MCP observability. I've published the RFC on the GitHub spec of MCP, the official MCP. I would love for everybody who listens here to go and upvote that. Observable.tools while I do the TLDR, but also definitely we'll chat about what this means very, very soon. And then we also announcement that we're the launch partner for Google's A2A. So what this means, we're officially in the launch and we're going to be supporting the A2A protocol for Google. So I'll definitely mention both these things, although I would love to chat about A2A separately. Voice and audio, super quick. We're almost there, folks. We're almost at the end of our TLDR. We have Amazon launching Nova, a speech-to-speech foundational model that's like state-of-the-art. Amazon has been flexing lately. And then we have High Dream, which is a new diffusion model. That's not happening every day. If you guys remember so far, Flux 2 and GPT-4 were the main models that kind of were leading the charts. And now we have some new, very previously unknown image diffusion model, 17 billion parameter called High Dream. So High Dream is like the state-of-the-art image generation model. We have this one thing that we can't wait to talk about. Our friends Ido and Liad have built GitMCP, which is a way to turn any GitHub into an MCP server, anyone. And so we're going to have them talk about that effort with us as well here. I think that's mostly it. All right, folks, this is it for the TLDR. And I'm looking at folks' comments to tell me if this is everything that we've covered today.
And you know what would be cool today?
Yeah.
The 100th episode, 1,000 followers on YouTube. Come on, people.
We're very close. I think we're almost there. We're almost there. So we're going to check out.
Three people.
Folks,
Only
three people left to join us on 1,000 people on YouTube. Thanks, Wolfram, for the shout out. We'll definitely get there by the end of the show. I want to pin the video to you guys on the stream so you'll be able to see, but you guys know where to go. There we go. This is the video. I'm going to pin this to the top of the space. And I think with the quick check that everybody's here, Nistan and Yam, welcome, folks. And I think it's time, LDJ was here. I think it's time for us to get started with the actual open source stuff. How do you guys think? Anything that I missed? No, let's start with open source. Open source AI, let's get it started. The main thing that we should talk about in open source is obviously Llama 4. But until we get there, I want to chat about an additional release that was released this week. And I want to chat with Michael. There we go. Michael, welcome.
Nice to meet you all.
Nice. Thank you for coming up. We're going to wait for a friend of yours, but if they don't join, that we're going to have interview you about this release that you guys just released. I want to just, I mentioned this briefly in the TLDR, but ThursdAI, together with Agentica, which is you guys, right, announced DeepCoder 14 billion parameters. And I love having the folks who worked on the model to actually talk to us about the models. First of all, welcome to the show. Please introduce yourself and the effort. And then let's talk about some of the updates, numbers, and what it took to get this model here.
Sure. So I'm currently Michael, a fourth-year PhD at UC Berkeley. And this model decoder is part of the Agentica project. And the Agentica project main goal is basically to democratize reinforcement learning for LLMs. And our goal here is to build great post-training systems for LLMs, as well as to discover training recipes that everyone can use, right? That's part of the democratization process. But that is pretty much the main goal.
Awesome. So Agentica is an Berkeley effort?
It is a Berkeley effort from Berkeley Skylab, as well as Berkeley AI Research. And we're a bunch of researchers from there. Yeah.
Alrighty. So let's talk about the thing that you released. I haven't seen releases from you guys before, at least it wasn't on my radar. Out of almost, I wouldn't say nowhere, but definitely as a surprise to me, because we've seen some stuff from ThursdAI. Obviously, Together has like great folks in there, but almost out of nowhere, together with you guys released one of the top coding models that is a fine-tune. So let's talk about fine-tune of what and how you guys achieved it, and then we're going to talk about a few more details.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Cool. Yeah. So regarding the fine-tuning process, is using DeepSeek's GRPO or a slightly improved version of a GRPO. The main idea here is really different than regular fine-tuning, right? In regular fine-tuning, you have a bunch of OpenAI chat completions data, and then you just fine-tune it with respect to that. But in this case, really, if you want a small model to become as good as O3 Mini, you need to have reinforcement learning. You have to teach a model to know what is right or wrong, right? So essentially what is right is I pass all my coding tests, and what is wrong is I fail on my coding tests. And a simple signals such as these and letting training go on for 2.5 weeks, you're able to get a 4DB model to relatively decent performance, right? So there's actually nothing new to the algorithm. There's nothing new to the system, but really the novel part here is just being patient and waiting for the model to train.
Yeah. Could you talk about the collaboration with ThursdAI, please? Did that happen? And what did you guys do?
Yeah, because we're researchers from academia, we're compute bound, right? So actually, we're fortunate enough to meet ThursdAI, who offered us a decent set of GPUs, 64 GPUs for us to train our models on. Right? In return for GPUs, we got better outreach and also a trainable model at 14B because we could have never trained that without their compute.
Yeah, that makes sense. So let's talk about some numbers. 0.6% on live code bench, which is an 8% improvement on the base model, which is quite impressive because the base model is DeepSeek R1 distilled Quen 14B. So I know it's a mouthful, but like this is Quen distillation fine-tuned on DeepSeek R1 outputs, which is we've covered both these labs and they're great at what they do anyway. And you guys achieve an 8% improvement while being academics and with a few GPUs from together, let's say, not the army of GPUs that Quen and DeepSeek has. And talk to me about the inference stuff. I would love to hear some more about this.
Sure. Yeah. So basically, part of this RL process requires training for very long context. Essentially, you have, let's say, a VM sampling engine, and it will sample stuff up to 32K context. And basically, we've trained our model up to 30K max. But the issue here is that existing models do not really generalize beyond their trained context, right? So, for example, if I took DeepSeek R1 or even DeepSeek and I train it on 30K context and generalize this for context, the performance remains the same because it doesn't exhibit these properties. But because we train our algorithm with a different version of GRPO and using overlap filtering from Doppel, we're able to show these generalizing properties where you can get good performance gains, out of domain performance gains where your context can scale up to 64K without even training on 64K context. And I think that's the beautiful part of reinforcement learning. It teaches your model how to generalize better.
Absolutely. One last thing I wanted to mention as a question to you before Anista also has a question. Talk to us about the data set. And also, I would shout out 100% every time that somebody comes here and releases link to weights and biases. So this is great. Folks can go into the WandB logs of this training and just take a look at everything. Michael, I believe that this is you, right? WandB.ai/mlua. So this is like literally your project at WandB. So shout out for releasing this. You guys also released the eval logs, which is absolutely great. Let's talk about the data set because you guys didn't just release the model. You also released multiple things, including the training logs, including the data set as well. Let's talk about the data. Where'd you get it? How'd you curate it? And what's cool about this? And thank you so much for releasing this because like we always applaud open source releases end to end.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, so this kind of aligns with our goal to democratize RL. That's why we open source everything. Regarding data sets, it was very difficult to procure the right data set because currently everyone does math for RL, and there are a lot of easy verifiable questions for math. And when we did it for math for DeepScaler, basically we got a 1.5B model to 43%. It was very easy to find a data set, right? It took less than a day. But for this one, it took actually a couple of weeks. And the reason behind this is most of the data sets on the open source are very, very dirty and unverifiable. And most of them are a bit too easy, right? And because of that, we had to do many iterations over the right combination of data sets.
All righty, folks. Michael, thank you so much for coming. Shout out to you and the team at Berkeley Agentica and Together for joining this effort. Incredible kudos for the very, very detailed blog post, very detailed evals metrics, logs and evaluation logs and data set, everything. Incredible kudos. We're going to always applaud this. Thank you so much for also coming up and talking to us. As I said, one of the coolest things we get to do here is to talk with the researchers that release the models. So folks can follow you and we'll add your links to the show notes as well. Thank you so much for coming. As we move on to Llama 4. Michael, any super quick shout outs to the team before we move on?
Yeah, shout out to Together AI, shout out to my advisors.
Yeah. Shout out to Alpay too, because he also helped us a lot last year.
Yep, Alpay is one of our good friends who's never on the show. He's like a Yeti. I've been trying to get Alpay on the show for 2 years. He may never come. Michael, thank you so much. You're considered now the friend of the pod as well. Come back to us. Feel free to stick around in the kind of the X stream as well. While we move on to Llama 4, because those are huge news. Thanks, Michael. Now, folks, it's time. First of all 5 of us are on stage. LDJ without his face on. Maybe 101 episode is what it takes for a person to show his face on stream. But besides this, folks, this week, Llama 4. What the hell is happening? Let's talk about this. From where are we with this effort? What did they release? What's going on? Let's cover Llama 4. I think folks need us to tell them what's going on.
You said Meta dropped Llama 4 in a way. They dropped it on a Saturday. They really dropped it there. And it's been long awaited. Then we got it earlier than expected. I was more expecting it later this month. So that was a surprise. And the model architecture was completely different.
This felt like it was a surprise for a few Meta folks as well within Meta. This felt on the Saturday release. We definitely all got like a little bit, I was on the mountain somewhere. We all got what is going on Saturday.
Yeah, a lot of controversy because of that. And the inference providers didn't have much chance. What I read about is they got 1 day in advance, so they could optimize via LLM, for example. And we may still be seeing issues with that. And the architecture is completely different than what we were used to. So there was a rumor that Meta scrapped everything and redid everything after the DeepSeek moment. What we are seeing here, the 70B and the smaller ones are all gone. Now we got the big models MOE for the first time. Multimodal, which is great, but the license says not in Europe, which is not great.
So here's how I joined the thing that you mentioned, like just sizes wise, right? We are used to running Llama models on our Macs. There's the whole community of open source, from big companies like Together AI, and Cerebras is now running Llama 4 1,000 tokens per second. That's all great. But to us in the open source, what open source means is local. To us, implicitly, open source means local. This is why we go to open source. If we need to run this in the cloud somewhere, we might as well run 4.0 or Gemini 2.5, which is incredible. Gemini 2.5 Flash, which is going to come out today, is also incredible, right? So for us, one of the coolest things about open source is the ability to run this on my device. Llama and some other folks were the models that we ran in the 7B and 72B, you could quantize them down. Llama 4 Scout, which is the smaller one that they released 2 models and promised us Behemoth, which is absolutely insane. We should talk about Behemoth. Llama 4 Scout is, they lead with 17 billion parameters, but those are 17 billion active parameters. There's an MOE that you need to download, 200 gigabytes. It's 109 billion total parameters. And 16 experts over 17 billion active parameters. Active parameters is great when you run it on the cloud. It's not great when I need to download and actually load this whole model into my Mac, right? Llama 4 Maverick, the largest brother, is a 400 billion parameter model. There's not a MacBook in the world that can run this, no matter how much you quantize, right? Or maybe you can say differently. But basically, this is why the community also bifurcated, because, hey, folks, we're used to smaller models for Llama. Where are small models? And it seems like maybe they couldn't achieve some of the performance boosts on top of, I don't know, the distilled versions of R1, for example, or Quen is doing an incredible job, enough to justify the release of smaller models, because I'm sure they trained it. Like, I'm sure they distilled this Behemoth thing into the 70 billion parameter. Maybe they didn't see enough of a difference to release this, which bummer for us on the open source side. Wolfram, go ahead. There's more things there with the messy release.
Yeah, and there was a version on LM Arena, which was an experimental version, so they were saying, oh, it's very good, but as turned out, that is not the model you can download.
What the hell was that?
Not a good thing, not a fair play in a way. So that is very weird. What is Meta doing? Why? So we all wanted this model.
Yeah, just to clarify, LM Arena is where, for folks who are still new, every time there's new folks here, there's folks selecting between 2 different models. They've been running this secretly against other models as well. And when they announced like, hey, this is like the numbers in LM Arena. It turns out that they provided them a different API. So they released Llama Scout and Llama Maverick in both instruct versions and base versions, which is great. Kudos to them. Base version is always great for fine-tuning. But there was another version that we did not get. There was only the API, right? That LM Arena got. Which is like, WTF, mate? What's going on? LDJ, you had a comment about this?
Yeah, on the original point of why they released on Saturday, there was somebody that asked Zuck on Threads why he did it, and he actually responded, and he said, because that's when it was ready. So there's that. I'm not sure if I exactly believe that. I feel like maybe they were trying to rush something out because of something else. But
shout out to Big Zuck with my whole love about the open source love and everything. That is some bullshit. That is a great bullshit because we know how these models work. You can keep training them. You can just sit and watch the last on weights and biases or whatever framework that you do, but obviously use weights and biases because ThursdAI. And then you can just sit and watch and then arbitrarily decide it's ready here or it's ready here. Like the statement makes no sense. I'm sorry. This is like a different thing. Also, Google Next is started Monday. So like Saturday was the release just before Google is gonna announce some crazy new shit. There's always these releases are not always like about the model as well. But yeah, LDJ, thanks.
Yeah,
thanks
so VLLM as well. What we were just talking about.
Could we ask one of you to clarify what VLLM is? Because folks who are listening to us may not know. I think it's important for the next part that we're gonna talk about.
Yeah, I think Wolfram or Niston, you guys have the most recent experience with it probably.
Niston, you want to give us a 1 minute on VLLM?
Ignore the V, the L, and LM. It's not an LLM. It's not a V. It's you could just call it orange for all you want. It's a runtime. It's what you need to use when you're running the model on multiple GPUs, and VLLM is the fastest because it does something which, for example, Llama CPP doesn't do, or LM Studio does not do, and that is tensor parallelism. So if you're going to run this model on multiple GPUs and you need to split it, or you have a small model and you need multiple copies of it to run really fast, you use VLLM because it has implemented tensor parallelism, and that makes it a lot faster when you're hosting it commercially, usually, or when you have multiple GPUs. So that's what you use for, I would say more than half, probably 2/3 of all commercial inference is all based on VLLM. The rest would be on NVIDIA's either TensorRT or Google's own runtime, and you have Llama CPP and stuff. But yeah, most commercial inference, they're running the models, is on VLLM.
And it's an open source project.
Yeah, it's completely open. So yeah, there has been issues in the past with VLLM as well. And I encountered almost the exact same garbling. So after you talk to the model for a while, it just starts to output a lot of gibberish, a lot of random characters. It's still coherent, but it just starts to garble out. And I've noticed this with DeepSeek V3 as well, which is a similar architecture. So yeah, this is just one of the issues.
Let's talk about the reason why we're basically mentioning VLLM as well. So not only did folks see a difference in quality of the model compared to LM Arena, there was also a bunch of providers that, like we said, got like 1 day. Hey, tada, here's like ours, please put them on. Previously, the reason why Zuck stated that Llama 4 is getting released this openly is because to get all these providers like ThursdAI that we just talked about and Cerebras and Core, like all of these like folks who kind of like put models on inference to align on this open source standard called Llama, which famously previously saved meta billions of dollars when they did this for the data center stuff, right? This is like the stated reason for Zuck to releasing Llama's open source. This time they gave him a day in advance. So basically the decision to send it, to ship it came on Friday probably, and then on Saturday they released the model, and some folks worked very hard weekends in these providers to put Llama 4, Maverick, and Scout on their inference, and then they put it on Open Router. And then folks started seeing, Wolfram, like differences between even the providers. So not only from the special version that LM Arena got via API, but also like the actual provider implementations. Part of it maybe is due to VLLM. Wolfram, you want to talk to us through some of this?
So Meta released it when it was ready for them, but they didn't give the inference providers a chance to. Of course, we were curious, we wanted to use them. It's actually possible to run the Scout model locally if you use a very small quant, almost 2-bit, for example. And I was running it on my own system with 30 tokens per second, which was quite fast. And it did pretty well. I posted the benchmark results, and then I decided I want to see how does the really good big original model do. So I thought, okay, use ThursdAI because they have not quantized version. That's a benchmark there, and it was worse in the full precision compared to what I was getting locally. So I was, what the fuck? That's impossible.
Wait a second, hold on. What you're just saying is crazy, so it bears repeating. Your very, very much quantized version, I think you used Unsloth or something like this, right?
Yeah, Unsloth, dynamic quantized.
Very quantized version, basically like low precision
2 to 3
version.
bits.
performed the hosted version that's hopefully full precision, because that's what we expect from hosted versions, on your benchmarks.
Yeah, it did. It's the MLU Pro benchmark, so it's not something specific. Everybody can reproduce it, and others have reproduced it as well. The results I was getting, they were consistent. I was not doing one benchmark, I was doing 4. And I did 4 with the Together API, both with the recommended settings and the default settings, which is temperature 0, for example.
Just to summarize for folks who are listening, this is a very low precision model. You get it like very significantly low precision in order to run on your hardware, because these models are huge and you're able to get it run on your hardware. But like the supposed downside is it's worse than the full precision model, which is trained in FP8, by the way, but you're getting better results. How much on MMLU Pro did you get?
I did get, with a local model, just the small model, I get 73%.
For Scout?
For Scout, yeah, locally.
Yeah.
And when I did it together, I was getting only 63 to 67%. So let's say 65. So that was a big difference between the original model, 65%, compared to the 72% I was getting with a tiny version of that was running locally. So that is normally not possible, which could mean 2 things actually. Either they fit on the training data, so the model wasn't very smart, but it had it in its memory in a way, or which is more likely that the big model has inference issues. So that is what I personally expect, that VLLM has issues, and that is, as far as I know, has even been confirmed already. So we are not getting the full quality yet. Maybe it's fixed today.
I've asked around. And also, let's shout out John Durbin and ThursdAI that also provided you like an inference as well. And you did some other retesting on other providers, not only Together AI. So we're not like pointing the finger here together specifically. And you got some decent results for some of them, but still not as much as they...
Maverick results. It was better than the old DeepSeek V3, but it was still not as good in this test. Of course, always talking about just what I tested. But Llama 4 Maverick on Open Router and on Tutes, both of them, they got about 82%. So that was also much better than the Scout versions.
It's also higher than what Meta released in their eval as well. Meta released for Maverick 80.5. So you're getting 82.
Yeah.
So
that was a full benchmark. I was just doing an excerpt on the computer science part, so I could run it in better time. So it's not exactly the same score, but it is a part, and it's very close. So I think both scores of Meta were right. And the big takeaway here is that it is the best Llama model we have, the Maverick. And it's also the biggest that you just can't run locally easily. But at least it's there. And if there is an inference issue, that also means that if the issue is fixed and the things I tested were with the issue, then it may raise even more. So maybe it does beat DeepSeek if it is fixed completely. That is something I can't tell yet because we have to wait for the fixes and benchmark it again to see.
Yep. So
yeah, according to Meta's benchmarks reported for Maverick, it actually trades blows with even DeepSeek 3 v.1. And for the Behemoth, it trades blows with Cloud 3.7. And so for that, it seems like this is also like my first theory when I see people showing benchmarks where it's actually Maverick is like really bad. My first thought is, okay, this is a new architecture, or it's using MOE, which previous models usually didn't. And I think, yeah, it's very possible that the inference frameworks are just not properly running the model. And like we have seen these types of things happen before at smaller scales, but I think that's probably the best explanation for this.
So let's talk about some of the other stuff, because, okay, the release was messy from multiple angles because of this. Saturday release, that's unprecedented. Maybe folks are chilling with their kids, for example, don't have the time. The inference providers didn't get enough time to maybe adjust and test it properly and compare this to the release metrics from Meta and Llama. A decision was made about when to release this. Fine. But also, there's a few new things that you mentioned. Let's run through them super quick. This is the first MOE from Llama. So far, they released dense model. One of the biggest dense models that we've got was 405B previously, Llama 3 1.1 405B. So first MOE release was like significantly less active parameters, only 17 billion active parameters, great on CPU, great on distributed stuff. We also have multimodal native capabilities there, images plus text. They use MetaClip for vision encoding, something new. Context windows, folks. Let's talk about context windows for a second. Meta Llama Scout is released with 1 million context window, and Meta Llama Maverick released with an absolutely staggering 10 million tokens in the context window, at least based on the announcement, not about how it performs. Based on the announcement, this absolutely deserves air horn, because 2 years ago, we were celebrating 4K to 6K to 8K jump, and then Rope moved us to 32K, and I was like, oh, when am I getting access to 32K? We're talking about 10 million tokens in the context window, at least conceptually supported. Whether or not it actually works like this or not, we will discuss next, but significantly longer context windows, which is insane. I think Google announced theoretical support for Gemini.
Big correction. Big correction. Scout, the smaller model, has a 10 million, and Maverick has a 1 million.
Yeah, thank you for that. Scout, the smaller one, has 10 million, and then Maverick has 1 million, correct? Interesting choice.
I think I'm the only one that actually liked the model, surprisingly.
Your expertise, I just want to run down the other new things that we got super quick, and then I would love to hear from you, because I would love to know vibes from the community. It trained on 3x more tokens compared to Llama 3. So we can jump in, I think, 40 trillion tokens for Scout and 22 trillion tokens for Maverick, which is absolutely insane. Improved multilingual capabilities as well, 10x more multilingual tokens, and iRope that LDJ also mentioned. Nistan, you use these models. You said you use them almost daily. What is your, how do you use them? Which version, where it's inferenced, and what's your experience like?
I just use them with the OpenWeb UI, and I've been using the Together and the Fireworks APIs for them. They are very fast. They're pretty good at tool use, because I have a whole bunch of my own tools set up. And so I usually start, the thing about OpenWeb UI is that it lets you start off with a model, and then you can switch to another model as you're talking to it. So I'm almost always starting off with Llama 4 Maverick. And it is very fast. It does the job initially. It can't really vibe code on its own. This is what I noticed. I am still waiting for better improved inference, and I have not tested the Llama CPP yet. But yeah, I noticed that I had to switch to R1 eventually. Even V3 doesn't really do it at some point if you need to solve a problem. The thing about this is that they mentioned they trained it all in 8-bit. So this is all 8-bit trained. There are some issues with VLLM, with the runtime again, that Llama CPP avoids, and that is it quantizes also very, very tiny sensitive parts of the model, which are called the layer norms. And you're not supposed to quantize those normalization linear layers, because they can induce much bigger errors further out in the model. So if someone ran it at bfloat 16 or FP16, I think that's probably what they hosted the inference on, then they would get much better performance. But again, you need 800 gigs of GPU to run the Llama 4 Maverick. So that's an issue there. The architecture is very interesting. I think Llama 4 Scout should be able to do pretty well on a 64 gig or 96 gig MacBook. It's probably the fastest model that you can run on that thing, and that's still very intelligent. So that's a good architecture for that. For Maverick, I am not as convinced, because, for example, DeepSeek has 37 billion active parameters. So it's 36 gigs of RAM is always active. 17B might be too small for how wide the model is. The expert weights tend to store, it's all very abstract, but they tend to store more of the knowledge of what the model knows. And the main weights, the K, Qs, and Vs, tend to store more of the actual logic and its ability to think. It's not exactly that, but it's roughly that. And also the previous DeepSeek Coder V2 had 23 billion or 27 billion active parameters. There's that as well. Also interesting to note was that when Junian came with the 1 million coin, he mentioned that it was an MOE of their 14B model, which is very interesting in this case, because that would make it a very similar architecture to what the Llama 4 Scout is now from a few months ago. Yeah, I like the model. It can't really vibe code. I'm still holding out judgment on it, and I tend to be the first to overreact. So I'm not quite convinced that issue is fully solved yet before making the call. It might also just be that the first initial test, it might be very well optimized for one question, one answer type of thing. So if you give it a really hard question, it can do the answer. And it answered all my very hard questions. So that's why I was very impressed at first. But in multi-turn, it wasn't quite doing it. So yeah, that's what I...
Yam, where's your take on this whole release and models? Give us a little bit of your...
I don't think there is anything in bad faith. I think it was just rushed, and many of the quality issues we see online. These things are hard. When you come up with a custom architecture, people need to understand that when we say VLLM is faster, it's not just for quality of life. When we say faster, it's pretty much impossible to run it normally, as people imagine, without appropriate infrastructure like VLLM. You can run it naively, but it's unusable. Chances are you're not even going to be able to run it on your hardware, even if your hardware theoretically allows it. So when people use VLLM, it's not just for quality of life. It's pretty much the only way they can do this. If drop on people a custom architecture they've never seen before and they have a couple of hours to implement it, mistakes can happen. This is why I think we see all this discrepancy between LLama and the evals and so on. I just think it was rushed, and we all see what happened this week, so we all understand pretty much why was it rushed this way. But overall, it's huge. Like, I didn't expect anything like this from even Llama 4. It's more than what I expected. I was just shocked by how far they are taking this. And just like you said, Alex, you can just train them more. They can just drop another one next week and pretty much solve many of the issues. And yeah, theoretically, I don't know if they're going to do it, but...
Well, we at least know that there's at least one more model they're about to drop, which is Llama 4 Behemoth. And let's cover that a little bit. So they gave us 2 models, but they announced 3 models, Scout and Maverick at the 109 billion parameters and then 400 billion parameters, MOE. Previously, they had Llama 3.1, we called it the Chunker Llama, which 4 or 5 billion parameters. They announced Llama 4 Behemoth at 2 trillion parameters. 2 trillion parameters. Like, it's getting ridiculous, folks. And then out of those 288 billion active parameters, still 16 experts, which is very interesting because other MOEs, bigger sizes MOEs, got to a crazy level of number of experts, like 200 or something. And then they basically mentioned that this model is a teacher model for distillation. It's not a model that you run inference of because it wouldn't make sense, but basically you would distill these models, like the Behemoth models, to make the smaller models better. Like we saw with R1, when they released the DeepSeek R1 and DeepSeek V3, etc., and then they use like DeepSeek R1 to distill into smaller models as well. So that model is coming at some point. It probably keeps training as well. So we're definitely going to get something else from them. One thing that I wanted to cover super quick is that the idea that they've trained on benchmarks, because they kind of release some stuff and then the quantization made
I must ask, how do you even overfit LMCs? Even if you want, how would you do this? I get that they're doing it, but I just don't understand why. Like, even if I wanted to do this.
You just do a lot more alpaca data sets with just one question, one answer.
I think it would be a lot of...
It's not really cheating. Yeah, I don't think that would even count as cheating. Because
so there was quite a few kind of things coming out in Reddit and some anonymous people who supposedly quit, etc. I just want to highlight that Ahmed Aldal, who leads Llama effort in Meta, came out very clearly against this and said there's no such thing as like doing this. There's no decision at which point we decided we'll quietly do this to appease Zach or whatever. While that checks out, those are probably the reasons for the differences in the benchmarking that we see, and we did see this as well between the different providers. We did start seeing like differences. So folks will catch up and we'll release like better support because it's hard, but absolutely a huge shout out to everyone in the Llama team for this incredible release. We've been seeing China taking over the open source significantly, Chinese folks and great labs, very super great labs like Alibaba Quen that we love on the show. Shout out to Jun Yang, like DeepSeek that basically broke the stock market until this break that we're in right now, until yesterday. That was the biggest break from the beginning of the year. Like great labs controlling the open source and just absolutely crushing it. It's great to see that we're waiting for OpenAI's open source release, maybe today, I don't know. But until then, it's great, and shout out to the whole Llama team for this huge effort.
I think instead of saying state of the art from now on, they should say a stock market breaking model.
Yeah,
that's what.
Alrighty. So I just want to.
You know what?
Yeah,
it shows how used we are to such big models, such big context length. So 1 million tokens. I remember when a year ago or so, I was happy if we could get more than 8K. And so this is an amazing advancement, and we get used to it. So we have great models. They are, even in my benchmarks, the Maverick was almost pretty much on par with Claude 3.7 Sonnet in just this benchmark, of course, but it's local solid in a way as well. And so we really have to celebrate that a bit more. I think
we
are all
absolutely have to celebrate. And I want to just join this celebration effort and to mention, folks, there's millions of dollars that Meta spent on giving you these open source models. Millions of dollars in compute and maybe hundreds of millions of dollars in paychecks and salaries to all the execs and the ML researchers and everybody who, like, Meta is giving us an incredible release. Yes, they didn't release the papers this time. They will probably follow up with some papers as well. Meta is absolutely standing in for the US, for the Western world, and hey, we can open source and we are open sourcing. We're confirming to this. This is absolutely to be celebrated. So what the release was messy. I absolutely think we should absolutely celebrate this incredible effort from Meta and shout out to everybody there who worked on it.
Just one little point. And the big thing, how if it is good or not, will show when the community does fine-tunes, distillations, what comes out of it.
Yep.
That there's a lot of potential, and we will see when the Hermes comes and the dolphins and all the other models, then we will see if it was really useful and good for the community.
And also another shout out is because of this, they gave us the base models, not only instruct models. So like the fine tunings folks can take the base model, start to comparing this to the fine tune model and start like beating it. As we talked about when Llama 3 was released, Llama 3 instruct was really hard to beat in fine tune. Like they did such a good job back then that like even the greatest folks like News Research, like Dolphin, like other those folks, John Durbin, like all of these folks with like the data sets had a really hard time. And so they all did some of the mix. We'll definitely probably see something like this here as well, but the community will absolutely pick it up. Absolutely great release. I want to smoothly move over to the next topic because I think it's relevant. And even in the eval that I'm going to show in a second, it's relevant. So NVIDIA released Llama Nemotron Ultra, which they announced multiple times on stage. Listen, you remember we talked about Jensen at one event at the beginning of the year. He showed something in the group chat. I was like, did they release this or did they just announce this? Then NVIDIA GTC, they released Nemotron. We actually chatted about this as well. We tried to bring NVIDIA folks here. NVIDIA legal department did not agree to them to talk about this. Fine, we're going to talk about this anyway by ourselves, but our friend Chris was on the actual release post for Nemotron, and they released the two smaller Nemotron distilled. So one of them is for the Llama 70B. Ultra released, and this is kind of a little bit of the evals that they show, and I love it. They released it a day after, I believe, on Monday, and they already included Llama Behemoth benchmarks within this Llama Nemotron Ultra. So again, Llama Nemotron Ultra is a distillation of Llama 3.1 405B, the previous version of Llama. Supposedly the newer versions of Llama should be better, and what we see is a very interesting thing, where the distilled version of 405B, which totals to 253 billion parameters, beats Behemoth, not Scout or Maverick. It beats Behemoth, the one that Llama just announced, didn't release. So this distilled version beats Behemoth at GPQA, which we know is like a very complex science questions. It beats on complex math. It beats Llama 3.1 405B on tool calling. Generally, they obviously pick the benchmarks because some of them only have all models, some of them have the few models. But also did they add MMLU here? No, they didn't add MMLU here. So basically, they took a previous version of the model, distilled, pruned it, and fine-tuned it in addition. And now it gets like very, very, very good on multiple things. Absolutely shout out to NVIDIA for this effort. Anything, folks, you would like to add for this effort? We've covered NVIDIA pruning and distilling before for Nemotron Ultra, but anything, if you want to add, this is now a good time to. Looks like we're all good here.
NVIDIA can do it. They're NVIDIA.
So I think that the highlight there is we are used to distilled models to run on like lower quants on our Macs. They're also adding pruning, which is a different way of reducing kind of the, not necessarily precision, but the sizes and the weights of the model. And so they pruned this 405B into 253 billion parameters, which is great. And you can find those on NIMS and like other things. Another thing that we want to mention is that this model has reasoning built in, with reasoning and without reasoning. So within the system message, you can decide for the Nemotron model to turn on reasoning. One thing that comes to mind is that Llama did not release any reasoning models. Folks, the Llama 4 releases came out, and those were MOE, FP8, a bunch of new stuff in there, multilingual, multimodal, not reasoning. So we didn't yet get, despite the fact that we rumored that there was like fire sales inside Meta and like they scraped it multiple times, despite all these rumors that came out, we didn't yet get a reasoning model from Llama, which I'm assuming we'll get at some point because the world is moving towards test time compute.
Shout out to NVIDIA for releasing the open code reasoning datasets. I don't necessarily like the NVIDIA models. I've had plenty of criticism, but they've been pushing the most open data sets out of anyone. And those are super, super useful.
All right.
And I think those are going to be valuable for a long time, like even after the model is gone.
Let's move to big companies and API. Like, no, so before this open source, we still have to cover a little bit, but yeah, I know this is getting long. We're exactly an hour and 10 minutes. We also need to mention KimiVL and KimiVL thinking. Let's talk about those because it feels like Kimi is not getting the spotlight that it deserves. All the time they release something and somebody else takes over. Kimi released an MOE reasoning VLM, and we love reasoning VLM. So we talked about QVQ from Quen a couple of times. Most of the major labs, like the big models, they're also reasoners with LLM. So Gemini 2.5 is a VLM reasoner, like it can see and reason. R1, famously the great reasoning model that came out in open source, R1 is only text and not multimodal. And we're getting a reasoning VLM, which I want to say it's a fine tune. I'm not sure entirely, but let me take a look. I think it's a fine tune, maybe not. So yeah, this is a fine tune of their base model of Moonlight. So KimiVL from Moonlight, 3 billion activated parameters. So very, very small, can run on local devices. And they show here a very great math vision test where they're on the top left kind of with a very high score compared to everybody else with activated parameters. Gemma 2, 27 billion parameters. They're beating that on the score with only activated like 3 billion parameters. 30th for math vision compared to 10x larger models. Now, it's an interesting choice to compare your active parameters to a full model, but still, very impressive result from Kimi. And there's a bunch of InfoQA tasks, and they're like basically leading the pack between even Quen 2.5 VL, which we know is a great vision model as well. Shout out to Kimi on this release. I believe. Go ahead.
I've been following them for some time. I think Kimi are pretty legit. I'm still waiting for Llama CVP support and to run this. I wasn't able to run it, and there are no quantizations of it yet because of that. But I am really waiting for this one because I think they were one of the first to use DeepSeek's GRPO technique on a small model, and they got the math model to perform as well as GPT-4o, which was like another 3B. This team has been doing some very interesting stuff, and I think it's very much being slept on right now as a model. And MIT license too.
Alrighty, so that covers the open source section of ThursdAI. There's been great releases, and we've chatted with Michael from DeepCoder. We covered Llama 4 at length. Now, because we're an hour and 10 minutes into the show, I want to take a break and remind folks you're on ThursdAI, the weekly AI news show that brings you the latest and greatest in AI. And also this show is sponsored by Words and Biases. We have a special segment here on the show that's called This Week's Buzz, where I talk about everything new in biases. And this week, there's something that I'm very, very proud of because I'm leading this internally and I want to chat with you about. And usually folks get a break on the stage. You can go and smoke if you want to, but I would love to enjoy telling you what I'm about in some biases. So let's go, let's get it. This is This Week's Buzz. Welcome to This Week's Buzz, folks, a corner of ThursdAI where I talk about everything that happens within Weights and Biases. And this week, I'm very, very excited to announce a few initiatives. One of them is something that I'm leading personally, which is why I'm very, very excited. And you know that we've been talking about MOE on the show multiple weeks in a row. We started with MCPing everyone with the March 6th show with the folks from Cloudflare about MCP just 101. If you don't know what MCP is, definitely go and check that episode out. You'll definitely get as excited as us. But I would just want to mention that while MCP is heating up everywhere, it's also very important to Weights and Biases to make sure that we're not missing this thing. And MCP has this very interesting benefits, but also drawbacks. One of the benefits is the standardization of tools. So if you have an agent or a chatbot, etc., this is an MCP client. And then the more you use MCPs as tools, the more kind of you trust other servers to run those tools and they don't run in your context. What this means is it's almost impossible to start observing end-to-end what your agent does or what your chatbot does. And Weights and Biases has a tool called Weave for LLM observability and evaluation. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, oh, this is great that this agent exists, but also, the more MCP tools an agent will use, the less your whole stack will become observable because you outsource the calls to your tools via this protocol. And we started thinking hard about this and what this means for developers and developer experience across AI agents. And we are very, very proud to launch an initiative that I call Observable Tools. That's an actual URL that you can go to, observable.tools. If you go there, what you'll see is, first of all, you'll see this great video that we did with Hedra Labs. And for folks who don't know the reference here, I'll maybe tell you at the end of my segment. But basically, you'll see a great manifesto. But also, this is a manifesto of ours that talks about observable tools. Let's make MCP tools transparent and observable. There's a discussion about peering into the MCP black box, and our vision is full stack agent observability that you as a developer can see every step of execution in the agent chain. So you'd be able to observe it and know what went wrong, and when it went wrong, you'd be able to do evaluations, etc. So for all those things, I think that, first of all, I invite you to go and check out the manifesto. I wrote it together with Gemini 2.5, but mostly I wrote it, but the Gemini 2.5 definitely helped. It's a great model for creative writing and helping you think through things. We think that observability is essential. We embrace open standards. MCP is an open standard and vendor neutral open standard. So we are embracing open telemetry as well, which is another vendor neutral open standard that should be able to tie into this for full observability across the execution. And we talk about the path forward. And in the path forward, what I want to highlight specifically is the fact that because MCP is an open standard, everybody can suggest changes to the protocol and the specification. Not everybody can actually affect the specification, and it's not as easy. Like MCP folks are absolutely swarmed suggestions and different proposals and ideas. And so we sent a proposal, this is my submission to the proposal. It's been getting a lot of attention already, but I would love for you to go in there as well. Proposal 269 on the MCP spec, adding OpenTelemetry trace support to MCP. And we've outlined a lot of the work and the way we think it should happen. I'll namely highlight a few things where we dispatch from maybe the regular OpenTelemetry model. We think that the tools need to report telemetry back to the client and not to a separate location, to ease of use, and so that the tools will not have the configuration for observability. If this means nothing to you, that's great. I have a diagram here that you can go and check out. We outlined specifically how we think this would work, the transmission mechanism, the standard, the notification types, and rationale for notification types. We went super, super deep on this. We researched into the protocol, including feeding via GitHub all of the code for the MCP spec into Gemini to review what we thought makes sense or doesn't make sense. So we actually came up with a very detailed spec of how to integrate OpenTelemetry within MCP protocol. We talk about alternatives as well. We have a bunch of schema changes. So basically very detailed, very deep suggestion to get to here. For folks who are just listening, what I'm showing on the screen right now is on the left. We see that you have an agent, the agent does some stuff, and then at some point it gets to an MCP call. And when that MCP call happens, our tools, observability tools, and not only us, all of our competitors as well, friends in the observability industry like Langsmith and Braintrust and Arise and all of these folks whose names are not to be mentioned on Thursday until today because we want collaboration. All of these folks, basically, if you trace your agent, when you get to an MCP tool call, all is MCP tool call and the timing the whole call took. What we want is something like this on the right, where with full observability within the tools, you can open up with the tool call and you can see within the tool call the several execution steps within the tool call separately. This will help your agent to get to a point of you can see as an agent developer full execution trace in one tree of everything that happened in your agent, regardless of which tools those ran. Obviously, you need the tools to support this, and this is the observability. This is what we're trying to support with observable tools. So this is our proposal. I invite everybody to go, if this interests you, read and support this as well. I invite our friends from the industry. Again, a shout out to Samuel from Lockfire who came in and gave a lot of comments. I invite folks from Galileo and Braintrust, all of the folks. Here's my call to action to you guys. Please join the RFC 269 on the MCP spec. and give your comments, give your thoughts, collaborate with the folks who are open telemetry, who are already there in the chat discussing the right way to do this versus the wrong way to do this. As developers who will build servers, please go in there and look and say, okay, for me as a developer to add observability, this will be harder, this will be easier. We also want you to participate in this, not only the labs that will end up benefiting from this. We want developers in there to talk about how the developer experience will happen. So this is our effort. This is a call to action to you. Please go to observable.tools. Please check out the video that I was very happy to build and get excited. It's an AI video. But also please participate, upvote this. So the folks, basically my goal in here is to make this impossible to ignore for the MCP authors, for the spec authors, because we think it's very important. And the only way to do this, to make it impossible to ignore, is to galvanize the community, to go in there and give thoughts and comments and upvotes. So this is my ask from you. If you want to give me a present for the 100th episode of ThursdAI, I'm very, very excited about this effort. This is my first foray into open source and specifications and RFCs. Very, very proud of the work that our team did in the preparation of all this. You'll see the very detailed specification that we put in there. Would love for you to join this effort with us as well. The second thing that I want to announce in this week's Buzz is that Google has released the agent-to-agent protocol, and Weights and Biases is a proud contributor from day one. I'm going to add the link here as well. So basically, Google released this new thing called agent-to-agent protocol. I think we'll cover this in the next section. I just wanted to highlight that out of the 100 or so companies that Google got to collaborate with them on this, Weights and Biases is one of the folks. And then I got the benefit to write the WB blog about our support for this. So definitely, I'm very excited about this protocol, and I would like to talk to you about the differences of that protocol versus MCP, because they're not competing. They're basically both kind of complementary standards. So this has been this week's Buzz. I think for the first time, maybe I'll invite comments in this week's Buzz for the next 2 minutes. I would love to hear from you guys, comments on this thing as well.
Unbelievably important. Seriously, so important. I think that's like, I just don't understand. Okay, I do understand, but I don't understand how other people don't see it. That let's start with tools. MCP at the moment has 4 different concepts, but everyone is focused on tools because it's very easy to understand what tools are. They let your model do things like search GitHub or something. People just there aren't specs of tools. Like, no one is specifying what tools your model actually sees. It changes everything. Like, you need to see, just tell me, like, my model is going to see, this is a search tool for GitHub. For example, what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. Anyway, but this is like a search tool from GitHub. It's very different if you generate a search tool for a specific repo than that you have a general search tool for GitHub. It's extremely different, even though you can do the same with both. It's extremely different for the model to actually see that. This is why I'm saying, like, what you guys at Weights and Biases are proposing, absolutely important. Absolutely transparent. You really want to see what your model sees and have a trace of every step of the way, because it's just very not intuitive today. And moreover, MCP has 4 different concepts. They have roots, which basically points your model to what data it needs to know about, and sampling, which is basically the other way around. Instead of you querying the model, that the model uses tools, like, you can just use it the other way around, like request predictions from the model through API, for example, and which allows you to do like loops and very crazy things that we didn't see people do at the moment. And reusable prompts. At the moment, you just see them thrown around. Everyone just stores them, however, but like one standard for reusable prompts, probably also with versioning and improvements and so on. The whole movement is extremely important and absolutely a great move. And it's great to see that it's adopted all around the market. Absolutely.
And just really quickly, I'd even go a step further and ask just for OpenAPI, just follow the OpenAPI standard too, because if you can advertise the tool search correctly and it can advertise all of its calls, then you can just take that and put it into Swagger, just like you do any other backend. And then any company can just work with it with their existing setup. Even if they're like a dinosaur insurance company or something, they can still use it. So yeah.
All right. So, folks, I appreciate the support. For folks who are listening, please go to wandb.me/MCP spec. This will be in the notes. This is a direct link to the spec. I would love participation, upvoting. Let's make this impossible to ignore so the MCP folks will look at this and say, oh, the community wants transparency within the whole stack of execution within MCP. Speaking of MCP, for folks who are listening, they don't see, but we have two other folks here, friends of mine, or at least one friend of mine, another new friend of mine, Ido, who joined us, who did also a crazy thing this week, and I really wanted to highlight this because, again, getting MCP built, but also a very, very interesting effort from you guys as well. So would love for you to maybe introduce yourself super briefly, and let's do like 10 minutes discussing the GitMCP tool that you guys built, but also would love to hear from you because Ido and Liad, I know you guys been deep into this thing, so would love to hear after the chat with us your kind of feedback on the effort that we're leading and just announced. So feel free to unmute. Liad, maybe start with you and then Ido about who you are and why are you here.
Yeah, hi. First of all, it's super fun to be here in the 100th episode. I'm a huge fan of Alex and the podcast. And so I'm Liad. I'm currently an engineer in Shopify. I've known Ido from my days in Duda. I usually a front-end architect and recently working a lot on MCP and AI infrastructure. And I let Ido introduce himself in a second. I'll just say that Alex asked us to be on this podcast because something super crazy that happened this week with an open source project that we started.
Awesome. So thanks, Alex. I'm really excited to be here and congratulations again. I also want confetti if you can. Basically, I started working with Liad and GitMCP. Like I said, we worked together in a previous company. Right now, I'm cloud architect and AI lead in Palo Alto Networks.
In Palo Alto Networks. I would just say, Liad, the company that you mentioned, this is how we met as well. I remember you interviewed me like a long time ago, and I was like, nah, this is not for me, but we stayed friends since then. We followed each other. So I'm very, very excited that throughout our like front-end stuff and back-end stuff, like different things, we ended up in this new world of AI. And very excited to have you here as well, because this week, you guys built something super cool, working nights and weekends, and that basically exploded. So let's walk through, first of all, what you built, and then a little bit of a story of how.
Yeah, okay. Everything started. So I was posting things about MCP for a while, and then everything started when Mr. Doob of 3JS, it's very popular now with the vibe coding. So he wrote that he created an LLMs fools TXT file, and it was 3 megabytes, so you can't feed it into LLM context. And I posted, okay, this sounds really good for an MCP. Who wants to join me to build an MCP, like a side project? And then he replied, that's a weird way to send me a DM. So we paired together and we decided to build a general purpose MCP for every GitHub repo documentation. We work on it for, I think, 3 nights. We have a full-time job, so we worked on it as a side project at nights. And we built this MCP server, this one, which is really complex behind the scenes because it's only one server, SSE, server sent events. So it's a remote server. It's very different from all the other MCP servers that are being built. And it's meant to be like a general purpose for every GitHub repo. So we built it and we really hacked through it last week and we released it on Thursday. We got amazing traction.
So just to clarify what I get as a developer by using GitMCP. So I work on a new repo, for example. There's a few ways for me to give my LLM the context, right? Austin works on GitHub GG, for example, where you drop the whole repo and it just gives you all of the text files in one huge chunk. And then for the bigger context models like 1 million Gemini, etc., you just dump the whole repo. But then not necessarily is that always better because we also need to be concerned about the context length, about the understanding of context. What you guys built is different. What you guys built is an MCP integration into every GitHub repo. Basically, so I'd be able to add this as a tool. And then what does it give my LLM as context?
So actually, it really benefits the people that develop using your repo because they can access all the documentation in your repo, be it README or LLMs.txt or even documentation in the code. They can access it every MCP client. So for example, if I'm working with LangGraph and I have questions about LangGraph, I just plug in this MCP and my IDE cursor can answer questions about LangGraph's documentation. And we provide search tools, semantic search tools, and fetching, and we support all sorts of formats. So really, this is an ad hoc, instant MCP server for every GitHub repo out there.
Question for Ido maybe to take on. You had mentioned is an effort from AnswerAI and Jeremy Howard. It's a great effort. Could you tell us like why you chose LLM.txt specifically? Because not everybody supports it yet, but maybe they will. I think Jeremy Howard also shouted out you guys because of this effort as well. Ido, maybe take us through the TXT thing and why you guys chose that. In addition, I think you have a fallback to the repo as well.
Mm-hmm. I think LLM.txt is a classic use case for this because it is targeted for LLM, so it fits right in. In there, you kind of have the format is you have a link and then can you find the relevant documentation? And it's something that is not human accessible at all, obviously, and is not even something that most agents can interact with. So the real power of a tool like this is say, okay, first tool, bring me the LLMs.txt with all the relevant links. Another tool is fetch the relevant link content. So it really makes something like LLMs.txt, which can be very difficult for people to consume, and grant them an easy way to get all the data they need in a single place.
All right. Thank you for the breaking down LLM.txt. Definitely folks should adopt this. I've seen a few tools that actually generate this based on kind of the stuff that you have. And I would love to invite folks to go and check out LLM.txt. I think Jeremy Howard doesn't do stuff just because. I've seen some feedback from Peter Levels about some web devs. LLM.txt is definitely absolutely necessary. And there's a reason why you guys chose this. Liad, walk me through a little bit about the virality that you guys got, maybe expectedly or unexpectedly. Would love to also hear about the Cloudflare kind of conversion as well.
So that was really crazy. We released on Thursday night. We got amazing traction and traffic. And we initially built on Vercel functions, so a serverless environment. But with all the crazy amount of traffic that we got, we really pushed the limit to the edge, pun intended. We really stretched this infrastructure with our SSE servers. SSE server, it requires a lot of memory to hold connections. And at some point, Ido was telling me, hey, we're probably gonna have to start paying dozens or hundreds of dollars every hour from now on. So we had to decide what to do. And all of a sudden, I got a DM from Guillermo Rausch, the CEO of Vercel, telling me, hey, do you want to be on the early release of arbitrary compute, which is like the long-running compute, something that can solve our problems? And we started to talk about it. And then a few hours later, I think it was 4 a.m. my time, I'm getting a DM. We were still working, so we were awake. I'm getting a DM from the CTO of Cloudflare saying, hey, why are you on Vercel?
The recent CTO, Dane just got this job like last week because the CTO just moved. So the recent CTO of Dane is a great dude.
Yeah. I was getting actually 3 DMs from 3 people in Cloudflare at the same time. One of them was the CTO, director of product was the other one. And saying, do you want to try to move to Cloudflare Workers? Because there's a big release of agents that they did this week. He said, yeah, we're willing to sponsor everything. So it will be on us, all the costs. And that's not something that you can easily say no to. So we started another blitz of coding. It was 5 a.m. for us. And we wrote the Cloudflare team, okay, we're just going to sleep for 2 hours and then we're going to continue working on that. And I really shout out to the Cloudflare team, which helped with us on a Saturday. We worked on a Saturday, they worked on a Saturday just to get us migrated. It wasn't an easy migration. This story got a lot of virality. We got to the front page of the leading tech magazine in Israel. And really, GitMCP is generating so much traction right now. We have Jeremy Howard featuring us as the proposed solution for GitHub documentation. We have a lot of packages, repositories, or libraries saying, hey, just use GitMCP if you want an MCP server for our documentation. So we're getting a lot of traction. I think we really hit a niche that needed to be solved here.
Yam, comments on this? I know you wanted to come out back for a question. And
yeah. Look, I can speak about this for hours. I just want to emphasize what is so novel about this. There are MCPs for GitHub tools and so on. But the thing is, what you get here is by going into this URL, your model gets a different tool specifically for a single GitHub repository. And this is what this tool is doing. The model then can use it with a single step, like it always sees the name of the GitHub, the name of the repo, exactly as it is written in the code. Each time it invokes this tool, it gets the documentation. You basically generate a different customized tool just by requesting this URL a little bit different. It's extremely novel. I haven't seen any MCP do this before, especially not at this scale. No one has ever done this at this scale, and it makes...
Congrats, folks, on this release. Very great work. I really wanted to highlight not only the crazy story that you had, but also the fact that folks can now use this. Actually give every chat that they have. ChatGPT is going to come out with MCP support. Google has announced MCP support. Sundar Pichai famously, and even all of these folks, like, we support MCP. It's going to get supported in SDK as well. They will definitely add this to like AI Studio. We looked at Quen, for example. Quen is about to support MCP. Everybody is jumping in on this protocol because it makes sense. And the more people jumping in on this, the more people will build on this. The more people will build, the more they will need to use different like repos for tools. And I think you guys did a great one. Liad, 2 things I wanted to ask you for. One of them is like future plans. What do you have in store now that it works, and some Cloudflare, shout out to Cloudflare as well. And second of all, I would love to hear your opinion about the observability kind of proposal that we just announced as well. So maybe we'll start with Ido and then Liad.
Yeah, I think future plans, maybe expanding beyond GitHub and going to other Git repositories. Maybe it's Hugging Face. I mean, the CEO of Hugging Face also asked us, maybe we can do that for them. So definitely stuff on the horizon for the open source project. And I think we'll see where that takes us.
Awesome. Yeah, we're looking forward to it, and please keep us posted, and we'll keep the community posted as well. Liad.
Yeah. So yeah, like Ido said, the plan ahead is actually clear. We have our work cut out for us, and we're still doing it as a side project. We're working at night. I think it's helpful that Ido has a jet lag because he just came back from the United States. So he's being up late. And I think about the observability proposal. So I read it. You sent it to me a few days ago. And I'm a little bit involved in the protocol itself, like the protocol definition itself. I'm reading a lot. I'm giving opinions in all sorts of forums. And I think that's something that was missing. It's missing. The proposal is really good. I think, Yam, that I don't know how it didn't happen till now. But I think we ran into that problem as well of trying what's exactly going on in terms of observability. So I really support this proposal. Great job.
And hopefully once it lands, if it lands, and when it lands, let's be positive here, you guys will be able to implement this into GitMCP as well. Liad, there's one more thing that I wanted to talk about, but we're not allowed technically to have you comment. But I will just say that one of the cool things we mentioned briefly, you work at Shopify. Shopify released their own MCP, which we can talk about. You guys released their own MCP for documentation as well previously, and that's in public. And also Shopify has done a pivot into AI completely. Look at this. I found this to be incredible. So there was a memo, and then Toby, the CEO of Shopify, and some other folks on LinkedIn posted the full memo. I found a few things very interesting there for our audience as well. One of them is you have to justify headcount. And by justifying headcount, this is all from the public release, right? No private information here or anything like this. But the justifying headcount thing broke my mind completely. The whole thing from Toby executive letter was you have to be reflexive about AI usage. You have to immediately think about AI first before everything else. And that's how he wants the company to run. It's been very clear that you guys have been supporting the MCP spec from the start as well, and with your own MCP. But also the fact that you have to, when you as a manager ask for more headcount, you have to justify why AI wouldn't like take care of that extra load by getting some other folks. And also that the performance reviews will include whether or not like you're using AI, which I find absolutely incredible as just an idea. So I think you work in a very progressive AI progressive space that fits very well with how we work here and how we think about AI here on ThursdAI. Folks, with that, thank you so much for coming. You're considered friends of the pod from now on. GitMCP is absolutely incredible. Folks should definitely give it a try. We're looking forward for some more of the stuff that you guys do. Although you got shout out pretty much for everyone in the industry. Just Jeremy Howard, like high five, is like worth a lot, but basically everybody else. So folks in the audience, definitely give GitMCP a try, and we'll keep moving because we have so much to talk about. And we are moving to big companies and APIs. Let's go. Alrighty, folks, and we'll welcome back our expert co-host to the stage because we have a bunch to cover and we haven't gotten to, I think, half of it, but we're now AI breaking news coming at you only on ThursdAI. Folks, we got breaking news from OpenAI. Sam Altman just announced like some hypey tweet before about the feature that he can't sleep because of at night, and there's only 3 features like this. Previously, LDJ, would you walk us through the breaking news announcement, please?
So the tweet says, starting today, Memory and ChatGPT can now reference all of your past chats to provide more personalized responses, drawing on your preferences and interests to make it even more helpful for writing, getting advice, learning, and beyond. There is no storage limit for what ChatGPT can reference when reference chat history is turned on.
So, unlike the memory stuff where ChatGPT selectively looks into your chat and decides, oh, this piece is very important for the user, what they just announced is a complete review of all of my chat. How? I have thousands of chats. How are they doing this? Can we take a guess?
It's probably some line graph, something going on. I don't think it's a RAG.
Yeah. I think it's like maybe like at least some fancy like vector embedding or something in the background happening like that.
It might be also, it might be a tiny model.
Yeah, I think it's still cool and like still a step forward, but it's probably not all in the context. And maybe in certain ways, it might even be better than if it was all in the context. It depends on what we were comparing, but yeah, this is interesting. Personally, I think I've had this feature on my chat for at least a couple of weeks now. To be honest, it's not a huge difference, but I suspect this is one of those things where as the models get better and reasoning gets better and models keep scaling, etc., I think over the next year or so, the models will be able to take advantage of this feature even more into higher resolution and even better understanding of your past chats.
We'll have to figure out if this was launched, but for us as well. So I think it's a great addition. I was voting for this, honestly, because I keep getting annoyed by the fact that remembered, let's say I talk about ThursdAI and it remembered from, I don't know, a year ago how many followers I have. And now every time I chat about this, like as a person on X with 24,000 followers, bro, we have more now. Which, speaking of which, I think, folks, we did this for a 100th episode. We're now past 1,000 followers on YouTube, which means we're clearly in the creator space for YouTube. So shout out, thank you everybody for joining. Thank you, folks. I'm very, very excited. I invite all of you to subscribe and put up a notification on YouTube so you'll always know when we go live, so you don't have to go next, etc. So shout out and thank you everybody for subscribing. Thank you, the YouTube crowd. YouTube crowd, please throw 100s in the chat to celebrate 100. Let's do this in the chat as well. All right, folks, we're moving on.
One thing to the ChatGPT release, but because I don't know if I really want every of my chats to be in the memory.
We don't know if you're going to get it because Europe is always...
Yeah, maybe I don't. I know Sama is listening, of course. I'm sure he watches. So feature request, let us flag chats for exclusion or inclusion or something. Make it configurable. Thanks.
Yes, absolutely. There's a few things that I've asked that I'm like, I don't know if I want a complete memory of all of this. Folks, let's talk about big companies APIs. I'm very, very excited about this. There's like a whole conversation we need to do about a protocol. Maybe we'll do a deep dive in the next feature because I don't think that we have enough time to cover this fully. And I'm really, really excited about this protocol. So I'm actually thinking we'll do a full deep dive. I'll chat with some folks from Google to come and talk to us about this as well. But Google announced like a bunch of new things. Let's walk through some of them. One of them is their new TPU, 7th generation TPU. Those are exciting news, maybe only for Google. I don't know how many folks are getting excited about TPUs. Nistan, you're saying no. What's exciting about this one for you?
It's if you look at the uptime for models, if you look at like Cloud's uptime, which OpenRouter tells you, Google's is always perfect. You look at their own hosting or the AWS one, sometimes it's 60%, sometimes it's 80% uptime for the whole day, which is pretty terrible for an enterprise product. Google's is always perfect. Even if they don't have the best models, they might just win on infrastructure alone.
Gemini 2.5 is kind of fire. Another thing that they've announced is Gemini 2.5 Flash, which is a new model we haven't heard of before. It was like Gemini 2.0 Flash, and Gemini 2.5 Flash, workhorse model with low latency and cost efficiency, will soon be available in Vertex AI. This is a semi-announcement. We don't love covering these announcements about, hey, something is coming. We don't love these, as well as we don't love announcing, but I still mention this, shout out to LinkedIn, that OpenRouter has 2 new special secret models that you can try, and all of them have 1 million context. And if you ask them, they're trained by Google. Yeah, I think you asked it as well. And it says, I'm trained by Google, but we don't know if it's trained by Google. It could be like some other stuff, and we don't know who this is. I think we have a confirmation from Jungyang that it's not Quen. I think I saw something like this pass across. So Google also announced VO2 editing capabilities. If you folks remember, in the very vast space of video models, generating video models, VO2 from Google is absolutely up there, beating Sora. We chatted with Blaine Brown here to talk about and compare it to Sora and like other ones. Kling and Haulia video. There's like a bunch of Minimax. There's like a bunch of video models released. Runway released Gen 4. VO2 is still one of the top ones significantly. And now they added video capabilities, editing capabilities. Imagen 3. Also thing that they've announced is deep research. Did you guys see this? From Gemini. Okay, folks, here's an announcement for you. Deep Research with 2.5 Pro. They integrated the best thinking model that they have into the Deep Research.
I used it quite a bit. Like I did run quite a few queries. It was good. This is just like OpenAI, or at least how OpenAI's Deep Research was a few weeks ago when it was just giving you 30-page reports. Yeah. They still cannot do that. I am still waiting for something that just dumps a whole report. I'm also very disappointed that they don't list the sources when you copy paste it or when you export it to a Google Doc. I really want those damn sources. And then you have to go through the UI and try to find them one at a time or make an agent for it, which is pretty stupid. Just release the sources you're already showing on the website. Why do I have to make a separate tool?
So feature request for them for sure. The comparison that they released now not the previous deep research, the 2.5 experimental deep research. Comparative evaluation of Gemini OpenAI deep research by folks. Obviously, this was released by Google, so take it with a grain of salt. But overall, 69.9% of people prefer the Gemini 2.5 deep research results over 30% of OpenAI deep research results. Instruction following, 60% of people say its instruction follows better. And again, deep research from OpenAI was to me another ChatGPT moment. This is, you guys thought, remember we talked with Dr. Umantaz here, and he says it gave him a full on like scientific research and like pattern search and like prior art, like a bunch of stuff. Incredible work. I keep using deep research as well. Reminder that OpenAI just recently gave deep research to ChatGPT $20 a month. This is free and unlimited for folks right now on the free tier, but basically for $20 a month, you'll get unlimited. Comprehensiveness, 76% preferred it over deep research. Very comprehensive. If there's one thing that you would describe the deep research program from OpenAI is comprehensiveness. It gives you way too much things sometimes to read. So I find like those metrics incredible. I haven't tried it yet fully because until just now I didn't get the 2.5 thing. So I'll definitely give it a try and let you guys know about some stuff. Also on the docket of Google releases, another thing that they've launched is Firebase Studio. Did you guys see this? Firebase Studio. So basically, we know that all of these apps that started to show up, like all of these labs that you can just like go and, why did it drop me in the documentation of Firebase Studio? Let me find this super quick. Introducing Firebase Studio. Yeah. So all of these companies that you can just drop a whole spec of a website you want to build, they're going to build them online for you. Unlike the IDEs like Windsurf and Cursor, like all of these things. Those are like complete vibe coding, let's say, websites and apps. Google has basically said, hey, we have a cloud-based agentic development environment designed to accelerate how you build, test, deploy, and run production quality AI applications all in one place. And basically, this is a reframe and a rebuild of something they had, Project IDX, they announced on Google I/O before.
Firebase.studio, that's the URL.
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
Firebase.studio. Let's go. Full stack AI workplace, and you can try it. And then you're able to build full stack things in there, and it looks incredible. So shout out to the Google folks that launched this. And I would love to invite the community to tell us how your experience is with this thing. I think we have more breaking news. Folks, we got more breaking news. Let's go.
Yeah, I think around ByteDance.
Let's do it. I love breaking news. AI breaking news coming at you only on ThursdAI. Alrighty, folks, we have ByteDance coming with a seed thinking version 1.5, a 200 billion reasoning model with only 20 billion active parameters that beats DeepSeek R1 across domains. Let's take a look at the chart here. We have seed thinking. Interestingly, they did not compare to Llama 4, Maverick, or Scout, but they compared it to DeepSeek R1 and Gemini 2.5 Pro and O3 Mini High, and it looks like on some comparisons they are beating DeepSeek R1, but not quite getting up to the Gemini 2.5 Pro or O3 Mini High. But this is a open model, correct? I think it's an open model. And they released,
not sure. I'll check.
Yeah. And they released, let's see if this person has a link here. So we got a GitHub repo. Actually, no, I don't see the model itself. I see some results. We have a technical report from them. We have the scores, 74 on AIME, which is, yeah, it's impressive. It beats DeepSeek R1 on multiple things and a smaller model. And they say results are from internal sandbox, which may differ from reported results. But yeah, I don't see the model itself. So just an announcement for now. Still breaking news. Biden has been killing it with the deep omni-human that was released last week. We talked about this and just general like lip syncing stuff. Shout out to Biden for this release, seed thinking, and hopefully they'll drop this because they've been dropping open source models as well. Yeah, we mentioned before about the official support for MCP. I just want to highlight this, that I'm very, very excited when Demis Hassabis and Sundar Pichai basically both say, MCP is a good protocol, rapidly becoming open standard for the AI agentic era. We're excited to announce we'll be supporting it for Gemini models and SDK. Look forward to developing it further with the MCP team and others in the industry. This is great. This is absolutely incredible as a support, and this just solidifies MCP as the one protocol that the tools will use. And folks, I think we're getting to the end of the show. Let's run through this super quick. Let's see if we covered anything else. Cloudflare, new agents SDK, Grok 3 releases an API tier. Finally, you're able to test the claims that Grok is like the best model as well. OpenAI adds memory. We chatted about this. I think I'm going to add just this HyDream 1 dev. Wolfram, have you seen this? Anybody, have you guys seen this?
I saw that image, what you are seeing now, but I haven't looked into it in more detail.
Looks like a better Flux. Oh, okay.
Yeah. This beats Flux and beats Recraft and beats Reve. Like all of these, like folks behind the scenes, there's a whole race of image models that try to get to some level. Now, OpenAI's GPT-4o, because of the talking to it, basically is the best one. And we all have Ghiblified ourselves multiple times now and did the Muppets and everything. But there's the diffusion models, and there's a new one coming out from a company called Hydream. And Hydream Dev on artificial analysis image arena leaderboard beats Flux and beats Imagine and beats Ideogram and beats like all of these folks at 1100 ELO score, and just comes very close to OpenAI. So if you haven't tried Hydream, give it a try. Instruction following is quite incredible. I think that is it for us. Here's some comparisons to Flux, and instruction following is like very, very, very good as well. And it's great at text as well. One thing that I don't know yet is whether or not this model is fine-tunable, but it is open source. So Flux, only the dev version is open source. The pro version is not. So this beats the pro version of Flux. So maybe it's a call to arms to the Flux team to release. Folks, I think that we've covered most of it. We didn't mention Novasonic from Amazon. Novasonic is their like a voice model that we can maybe play a sample of later, but basically a speech-to-speech model that sounds super cool. And I know, Wolfram, we generally geek out with you on this, but I think we're coming out at the end of the episode, exactly 2 hours. I want to close this episode with the fact that multiple things happened during the 100th episode for ThursdAI. First of all, folks, 100 episodes is a fucking lot of time that we spend here with all of you in the community. So every time I finish the show, I'm very full with gratitude to everybody who listens. We had more than 1,300 folks tune in across different streams, and also on X. A bunch of folks reshared our content and enjoy it, and multiple more folks listen up, following, and are getting the news from us. So first of all, shout out to you guys for showing up and clearly explaining the news. I love the fact that we have guests from the community that are actually working on the stuff that we announce, and we have the ability to spotlight them, even if compared to the OpenAI release, that's not necessarily going to change the news as much, but we want to highlight the folks who work on open source and do a lot selflessly, like the folks who did something that they built in their time to support and really help tons of people. So love to highlight great work from community. Obviously, it's great to also cover the huge companies. If we're involved, like with the A2A protocol, that's even better. But generally, we want to let you know what is the latest and greatest in the world of AI, and it's been absolutely my pleasure, and I think I speak for all of us. It's been our pleasure to deliver 100 episodes of ThursdAI to you guys and spend it with the community. That's been growing like crazy. We just passed 1,000 followers on YouTube, and the next target is 10,000. So tell your friends and your loved ones also to subscribe. If you have multiple YouTube accounts, definitely do that as well. With that, I think we'll conclude the show for today. If you have missed any part of ThursdAI, don't worry. Just subscribe to ThursdAI.news and you'll get everything, all of the links and mentions and people and everything that we've mentioned, you'll get in show notes as well, including a breakdown and summary of the conversation that we had as well. This has been the 100th episodes. Anything to add, folks, before we conclude?
To the next 100.
To the next 100. Let's go. Let's go. All right, folks. With this, we're going to end the stream for today. Thank you for joining ThursdAI, and have a great Thursday, and we'll be back with you here next week. Bye-bye.